Well, good afternoon, councillors, and good afternoon, members of the community, pardon me, viewing in on live stream, and good afternoon to members in the gallery and our press. This is a special meeting of council to consider the resignation of former councillor Tanya Lynch and to plot a path forward. I'd like to open the meeting officially by taking this opportunity to respectfully acknowledge the Durrumbal people, the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We have a full attendance, councillors. We have no leave of absences or apologies, no declarations of interest in matters on the agenda, no public forums or deputations. There's no business arising or outstanding from previous meetings because this is a special meeting. No presentation of petitions. There are no councillor or delegate reports, and there are no reports from the Audit, Risk and Business Improvement Committee. So we go to item 10, councillors, which is the report at hand, and I'll just pass to the CEO to give us a bit of an update on what's going on at the moment, Mr. CEO.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. As councillors are aware, former councillor Tanya Lynch resigned from her office as Livingstone Shire councillor this past Thursday, the 4th of March. As that resignation was received within 12 months from the date of the last local government election, the governing law allows, and indeed it requires, that the council chooses how to fill that vacancy by choosing one of two options. The first is to stage a by-election. The alternative is to request the Electoral Commission of Queensland to reach out to the next highest polling candidate, referred to as the runner-up, and seek their consent to be installed as the replacement councillor. The Electoral Commission has provided a quote to undertake the by-election that's shown in your report, and the quote is a little over $225,000. The alternative would be handled mostly administratively and notional, if any, cost. Councillors are invited to choose an option to proceed, and we've provided both alternatives in the recommendation presented to you. Once council has resolved its decision, I will notify the Electoral Commission accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. So, councillors, as you would have seen from the report, the recommendation is in 3 parts. The third part requires us to make a decision. So, in the interest of progressing debate, councillors, I've put an alternate motion to the table. So, Mr. CEO, in terms of dealing with the alternate motion, we're dealing with this one first.
At the Chair's discretion, you're not required to deal with the recommendation if there is another proposal.
All right. Well, can we put the alternate proposal up so that councillors can see it, please, Amanda? So it's in 2 parts, councillors. Firstly, that one, there's actually should be two resolutions here, Amanda. One is that the resignation of Councillor Tanya Lynch from the office of councillor, effective the 4th of March 2021, be received, and that a letter be sent to former councillor Lynch thanking her for her service. And the second recommendation, the second part of the proposed amendment, proposed resolution, I beg your pardon, is that 1, council note that the resignation has arisen within the beginning of the local government term, within 12 months from the last local government election. And 2, accordingly, and pursuant to section 166 subsection 2 of the Act, council resolves to fill the vacancy in the office of councillor by requesting the Electoral Commission of Queensland to give vacancy notice and seek consent from the runner-up for the last local government election as prescribed by section 166A of the Act to be appointed to the vacant position. So this is in the interest of getting debate started, councillors. So I will propose, I'll propose that one. Thank you, Councillor Eastwood. So the...
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, in proposing that one, are you, and with the seconder, are you moving both of them or the first one?
I shall move 1 and 2 of Councillor Hutton. Okay. Did you wish to move number 1?
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Happy with that. So the first one moved by Councillor Hutton, because Councillor Hutton did discuss this with me prior to the meeting. Seconded Councillor Friend, thank you. All right, so we're dealing with Resolution 1 first, councillors, at the resignation of Councillor Tanya Lynch from the office of councillor, effective 4th of March 2021, be received, and that a letter be sent to former Councillor Lynch thanking her for her service. Councillor Hutton, would you like to speak to that, please? Is there a question, Councillor?
Thank you. So everything above council resolution is irrelevant here. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, the officer's recommendation is just an officer's recommendation.
Yes.
This is an alternate resolution now that we're considering, Councillor. With officers' recommendations, you don't necessarily have to debate those.
Yes.
So I'm putting forward an alternate motion. Councillor Bello.
Yeah, I totally concur with the direction we're taking, but do we need to say, notwithstanding the officer's recommendation, which they've actually put forth, which we're not accepting their recommendation, so effectively this is a foreshadowed motion virtually, or it's in...
My understanding, Mr CEO, is we don't need to do that.
There is a requirement to record reasons for departing from an officer's recommendation in a sense where it might be a departure from a professional planning or engineering position. In effect, whilst the wording is slightly different, it hasn't departed from the intent of the officer's recommendation. The officer's recommendation required an option, required the councillors to choose an option. The proposal is one of those options. That there's nothing precluding you from simply moving. The record will show that that was the officer's recommendation. There were alternate resolutions proposed, but it won't trigger that requirement to record reasons for the departure.
We're essentially just splitting it in two, Councillor Bello, really. Okay, so Councillor Hutton, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think in acknowledging the shock that all of us will have suffered with the decision of Councillor Lynch to retire, we can also respect the decision that she's made both for herself, her family and for her business interests. Us, community, is one of service, and for some of us we're lucky enough to serve as councillors to this great community, others as state or public servants, or for others it's serving in not-for-profit groups including Lions, Cubs, Scouts, etc. I know that former Councillor Lynch's service will continue, and in fact even today we have the email to say that she'll continue on with Capricorn Enterprise in their tourism subcommittee, which is a sign of her commitment to this region and to the advancing of economic development through tourism, which is a wonderful thing. Ultimately in life we all have to make choices in the best interests of our families first, you know. In fact the Lions motto is first comes family, second comes business, and then if there's a little bit of time comes time for service of the community. And I think that I can both offer my thanks to former Councillor Lynch for her service, but also thank her for being courageous enough to make the decision that she knows is right for her and for her family, and hope that we can honour that by providing her with that letter acknowledging the effort that she made on behalf of this community.
Thank you, Councillor Hutton. Is anyone speaking against the resolution?
Just a question, Mr. Mayor.
Yep, Councillor.
I'm not sure whether Councillor Hutton's motion is a foreshadowed motion or an amendment to your motion.
No, the proposed resolution is part 1 and part 2. So the motion that Councillor Hutton has just moved and Councillor Friend's just seconded is his motion. Ultimately, it's not mine, Councillor.
I understand that. You're not breaking breaking it into two parts, are you, Mr. Mayor?
There are two separate resolutions, Councillor Mather.
Okay, so I just need to be clear. We're dealing with two separate motions here.
Correct.
But you moved the
No,
1 and 2.
No, I did not. I actually withdrew my motion as number 1, and Councillor Hutton moved that, and Councillor Friend seconded that. When we come to deal with the second one, we'll get a mover and a seconder on that as well.
Now you've got me confused, Mr. Mayor.
Right.
I don't know why everything's
up on the screen, Councillor, you've got Resolution 1, which is the resignation of Councillor Tanya Lynch from the office of Councillor effective 4th of March 2021 be received, and that a letter be sent to former Councillor Lynch thanking her for her service. That's been moved by Councillor Hutton, seconded by Councillor Friend.
Yes.
Okay. Second,
So that you're happy to have one motion on its own?
I'm happy to have one motion on its own, and we'll have a second motion once
Okay.
this one's been dealt with.
Okay.
Okay. So, anyone speaking against this one? Councillor Friend.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, let me say to the community and my colleagues here at the table that former Councillor Lynch will be missed, and her valued input at this table is quite a loss. Mrs. Lynch picked up the baton of councillor and she ran with it for 11 months. She learnt what she could about council, and a great deal of information came her way, and she dealt with it with humility, and she worked very hard whilst she was a councillor. So I'd like to congratulate her for a prosperous future for her family and for her business, and thank her for her 11 months of service to council.
Thank you, Councillor Friend. Would anyone else like to speak to the resolution? Councillor Eastwood.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just want to thank Councillor Lynch personally for her service to the community and for the effort she put into her portfolios. She's going to be sadly missed at this table, and I just wish her all the well for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Eastwood. Would anyone else like to speak to the resolution? Councillor Mather.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When anybody puts their hand up to represent the people, it always comes at a price one way or the other. It certainly takes its toll on your time, on your energy, on your thinking, and holidays. Tanya was always willing and easy to get along and cooperate any way she could. For 11 months, she did her job and she did it well. And it was a pleasure to have her at the table. I believe that the demands on her family and her business obviously took their toll. And she struggled with trying to do all things for all people. And we know that it just can't happen. Not successfully anyway. But she did contribute, and she knew that she contributed. And we will miss her. But I think it's a lesson that she has learned, that family must come first. And although we all struggle one way or another to do the job, we'll just consolidate, we'll move forward and thank her for her services, and know that she's always welcome to come in for a cup of tea whenever she feels like it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. Councillor Bello.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm reminded of President Roosevelt's comment or quote that said that we only make 3 decisions in life ultimately. Only 3. And the first decision is the best decision. The second decision we make in life is the wrong decision. And the third decision we make is ultimately the worst decision of all, and that's to make no decision. And I believe that the former Councillor Lynch was faced with a decision, and she knew that she was going to try and make the best decision for her and her family, which she's done. Some may disagree that she should have stayed on. Others will certainly mourn the loss of her being here, but I think she's made the right decision for her, and I commend her for her desire to step up and join the ranks of those that can say that I actually did it. I stepped into the arena of public life, and unless you've done it yourself, you never know really what it's like. So for the 12 or 11 months that she was here, I think that she can stand extremely proud of her effort and her achievements in that short time, and I wish her all the very best for her future endeavours. So congratulations to Tanya.
Thank you, Councillor Bello. If I could just echo Councillor Bello's comments. Anybody stepping into a local government position as councillor, particularly if they have had no experience beforehand, and if we think about Councillor Lynch compared to the other councillors around this table. She was the one that had no experience whatsoever in local government. And when you take on a role like this, you're up for a massive learning period of time, and you're on a big learning curve. And certainly Councillor Lynch embraced that with gusto and professionalism, and in terms of balancing all of that with her business and with her family life is just a credit to her as a person. So just wanted to echo those comments as well, Councillor. Councillor Hutton, would you like to wrap up? All right. Okay, councillors, I think this one's going to be fairly straightforward. So all in favour of resolution, thank you. Carried unanimously. All right, so the second resolution, council, is that firstly, council note that the resignation has arisen from the beginning of the local government term, that is within 12 months from the last local government election. And secondly, accordingly, and pursuant to section 166 subsection 2 of the Act, council resolves to fill the vacancy in the office of councillor by requesting the Electoral Commission of Queensland to give vacancy notice and seek consent from the runner-up from the last local government election as prescribed by section 166A of the Act to be appointed to the vacant position. I'm happy to move that one, councillor. Seconded, Councillor Eastwood. Thank you. And just
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Just one quick question, and it has a non-tangible impact on the resolution itself. But where it says council resolves to, would you consider an addition of council resolves to choose to fill the vacancy in the office of councillor, acknowledging that it's a choice?
I'm okay with that wording, councillor. Resolves to choose to fill. To choose to fill. Seconder, okay, Councillor Eastwood? Yep.
I just wonder what the
Well,
purpose of
Councillor
that would be.
Hutton's point is that this is a choice. There's a choice of two options here. And I'm just going to go into that in a minute, councillor, so if you just bear with me for a second. So for members of the community viewing in via live stream, under the local government legislation, in a situation where a councillor resigns or retires or leaves the post within 12 months of the last election, council has two options that it may pursue. The first is it may call for a by-election. The second option is it may ask the Electoral Commission of Queensland to approach the candidate from the most recent local government election with the number of votes most close to Councillor Lynch or former Councillor Lynch to see if that person was prepared to accept the role of councillor at Livingstone Shire Council. So that's the second part of this proposed resolution, councillors, in that we are, the resolution is suggesting or proposing that we ask the Electoral Commission of Queensland to approach the nearest runner-up to former Councillor Lynch in the last local government election to see whether he is interested in becoming a councillor at Livingstone Shire Council. So, Councillor Mather, have I answered your question okay? Okay. All right, so council, I've got a mover and a seconder. So councillors, I'll quickly speak to this. In proposing particularly part 2 of this resolution, I'm conscious of two things. First of all is the democratic process, and I've had a number of conversations over the weekend with a number of different ratepayers and members of our community. And although this view may not be shared around the table, and I certainly welcome the democratic process around discussion on that, but the view that's commonly expressed by the community is that the democratic process was satisfied last time round, in the sense that there was probably 300 votes between Councillor Lynch and the nearest candidate below her. And so their view was that democracy has essentially been served by going to that next runner-up to see whether they were interested in assuming the role of councillor. The second issue, and again I know there will be contrary views around the table, and that's absolutely fine, but at the moment we're in a budgetary process. We are asking our officers to tighten their belts in terms of spending. We are asking the community to bear with us in terms of what we bring down in the way of a budget. And in all conscience, I can't go to the community and essentially say I'm prepared to spend or support spending $225,000, Mr CEO, on a by-election. That's an awful lot of money, and there are lots of things we could do with that amount of money, in my opinion, councillors, in the budget process. So that's my thinking around this, councillors, and I'm happy to ask for anybody who wants to speak against now to speak. Councillor Hutton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Democracy is derived from the Greek word demos, which means people, and kratos, which means power, people power. Acknowledging democracy does have a high price. We must then remember Sir Winston Churchill, who said, "Democracy is the worst form of government except all others." When I was first informed of the resignation of Councillor Lynch and she offered a view that it would simply go to the next in line, I admit it was extraordinary. I wished to acknowledge her wishes, and I actually accepted that it would be resolved without fuss or expense. That was until we received the report from officers with the advice from the Electoral Commission Queensland that stated that as an elected member, and I guess, how important is that word elected member, I would be voting today in a special council meeting on the choice provided to Livingston to choose between holding a by-election or to appoint beyond the elected candidates as a result of the 2020 local government election. Having read the report, it's my belief that if I have a choice, the people must have a choice. We are not elected to provide an unelected colleague, a friend, a neighbour, or anyone we know a 3-year appointment to make decisions on behalf of the community to which they weren't chosen. In fact, we can't even seek to explain an appointment as a continuation of a team or a shared set of values, as all candidates ran independently. Furthermore, we can't assume that in rerunning the last election, that in the absence of Councillor Lynch running, any candidate would have been assured victory. Was it the wishes of the electors to have a near-perfect balance in the gender of the councillors? Was it about our ages collectively? Was it about just the individuals? No matter what it was a democratic outcome with each of us chosen above our peers and fellow candidates. Importantly, the voters, the electors, the people chose who would win and who would lose. Elections let us have a voice in who represents us, and as well as letting us choose who won't. Candidates who didn't win simply didn't win. While I strongly value the role every candidate plays in giving choice and their service they provide to the community, I can't condone an unelected councillor serving 3 years helping make huge decisions about our community's future without any sort of direct democratic mandate from the people. Acknowledging in this case 3 years is the equivalent of a federal member's term of parliament, and until this first term started in October, the same as a state MP. And should a state or a federal MP retire or resign, every time it gets taken back to the people, for the people to have their say, to make their choice. As stated by the LGAQ, a by-election is the best way to ensure candidates who fill vacancies have the support of the people they will represent. Our council has previously taken a position on this, with a motion carried unanimously by this table to lobby for changes to the Act, because it felt so strongly that filling vacancies should require an election. Our motion, which was taken to the state conference and carried there, stated that participation in a democratic process is not in itself a reflection of a democratic outcome, unless the will of the voters in choosing both who they wish to elect and who they choose not to elect is respected. It goes on to state that the Act presents a dilemma, as a person rejected by the democratic majority will be installed for the remaining term of a council based on their participation alone. We voted unanimously and called on all councils to support this. And throughout the state, there are councils who have gone to by-elections in this last 12 months. Rockhampton, Townsville, Barcoo, Winton, Arakoon and the Torres Strait Island councils have all held by-elections since the 2020 local government elections, ensuring the voice of their community is heard and that all councillors are elected by the people. Locally, we've engaged our community in a matter of processes of feedback on projects of voting on choices for parks, naming of assets, of submissions for the budget, bike racks, car parking, caravan policy, and most recently we asked our community for their views on GKI, along with our community voice panels we implemented. This council has shown it values the voice of the community, and today we need to do this again. We should have a by-election. The people of Livingston must choose. In wrapping up, I don't seek to dismiss the cost of an election. I know an election has a cost, but with an election comes the voice of the people and direct democratic legitimacy. I can't say in faith that the price of democracy is too high. With 3 years left to serve and some very big decisions to make, I honestly can't imagine any price we pay today being as high as the price that has already been paid by others before us. The people of Livingston must choose. Finally, today is International Women's Day, and I personally lament that we as a community lost a strong, independent woman as a councillor this past week, and hope that in line with the International Women's Day 2021 theme, that we challenge our community. Perhaps with an election, we might see nominations from a broad range of candidates to give the community an option to see more women in leadership and to achieve an equal future in a COVID-19 world. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hutton. Councillor Rees was the second. Did you want to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thanks for Councillor Hutton's comments. I do have a different viewpoint, however, and I do believe that our people have no appetite at all for a by-election and for the costs involved. I also believe that, contrary to the good councillor, that the next in line was chosen. And if we took Councillor Lynch out of the equation, we would have been sitting here at this table today. I also like to remind our councillors that it is only 11 months since that election. It's not a huge amount of time and still very, very fresh in our minds. I actually came 7th myself in a council election and just missed out and had to go to a by-election. It was 2 years later, which I actually won and managed to come to the council table. And I had a lot of comments about maybe I should have gone straight in, which wasn't how it was at the time because I still isn't. But I do understand that the voice of the people out there is very strong on this. And yes, it could be argued it's not democratic, but I argue the other way. I think the elections happened. It was election for us that are here today, and it's just one spot down, 300 votes, and I'm very, very happy to endorse the next candidate, and I'm actually excited about it. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Eastwood. I'll just open the floor now. Councillor Friend.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr Mayor. Mrs Lynch resigned her position 11 months into her tenure, and by doing so, to me, her intent has been made clear that she did not wish to cause a compulsory by-election. She had resigned after the 12 months. If she had resigned after the 12 months, then we wouldn't be meeting here today. It has been advised that a by-election would cost $225,455 to be exact. I have looked closely at the Livingstone Shire election results. Former Councillor Lynch became a declared candidate with 9,780 votes, and she had 8.19% of the vote. Mr Watson just missed out with 9,633 votes, or 8.07% of the vote. That's a difference of 147 votes. Gosh, that's less people than you get at the Strand on a Saturday night. To inconvenience 26,427 voters, costing a total of $225,455, I'm thinking I'll vote for requesting the Electoral Commission of Queensland to seek the consent of the runner-up from the past election to be appointed to the position. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Friend. I stand corrected. I thought the result was a bit further out than that, but the gap was a bit wider. Thank you for that information. Anyone else wish to make a comment? Councillor Mather? All right. Councillor Bello.
Thank you, Councillor Mather, for the opportunity to speak now. In supporting this motion, it would seem that I'm contradicting myself where I was previously vehemently opposed to the recent changes that the state government introduced, whereby a mayoral, an incumbent mayor who resigned would automatically go to the next person. I think the attitude of the people across Queensland was clearly heard, and we saw them change legislation with the stroke of a pen overnight, and we know that our neighbouring council was at the centre of that. Why then does this not transcend into the councillor's domain as opposed to the mayor? And I think it's a very good question, and I think the points that Councillor Hutton put forward, in principle I support 100% that democracy is, you cannot put a price on it. However, I was actually reading a little bit about Socrates early in the week, how he said the worst thing about democracy is asking people who have no interest, have no understanding of the decision they're about to make, and actually giving them a chance to vote. Much like if a ship was sailing across the ocean, you said, right, ask the crew, ask the passengers, where do you want to go? You would have skilled, capable people who know the subject and look to them to make the decision. So I don't want to diminish the views of the people out there that are interested in this particular matter. And I think Councillor Eastwood has pointed out that it's coming through loud and clear that the general population that I interact with have made it clear to me that they do not want to see that sort of expenditure on a decision whereby the next in line was very close. And I think it's perhaps because there's like a dilution of power that comes down through your councillors, where there's so many more of you to, I guess, absorb the decision-making process. Whereas with the mayor, it's the pinnacle of the council as such. And one of two candidates could be polarisingly different. That's how I rationalise my different point of view from the one that was changed, as we saw in Rockhampton. So, based on that, I commend Councillor Lynch for giving us, in many ways, the opportunity to make a choice. And to have a choice is an extremely powerful thing to have. And every time you're able to exercise that, I believe we should thank those that gave us the right to do that. In this case, that was Councillor Lynch, and I'm grateful now to be able to make a choice to say that I'm prepared to appoint the next person in line, and whoever that may be. I'm satisfied with that decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bello. Councillor Mather.
I find it difficult that it's been suggested that we will not be acting democratically if we didn't go to a by-election. On the contrary, it's basically been suggested that we can't make this decision because the people didn't choose the next in line. I've been an advocate of the next in line when the legislation permits for a very long time. It works because it gives the person who put themselves up to be scrutinised all over the Shire. It gives the public an opportunity to ask them questions, check them out, ask their policies, and make the decision. The next in line in this case did just that on 2 previous occasions. And as we know, sometimes it takes 3 goes to get there. But I'm sure he wouldn't be expecting this was the way he could have won it. 3 years is an awful long time in politics. 1 day is a very long time. And today, it's both a sad day by recognising Tanya as being one of us, then to be told that whatever we do, if we don't go to a by-election, we're not being democratic. I would suggest that the state government is a democratically elected body who democratically put up legislation before their lawyers, enshrined it into the Local Government Act to tell us how we could do it. Everything isn't cut and dry in local government. There's always a twist down the end of the line. And the state recognised the cost to the ratepayers if somebody were to vacate their position. So they put up legislation that says, okay, if there's a vacancy within the first 12 months, we recognise it's still early days. We're going to give you a choice. That state government, who was democratically elected, with no doubt legislation that has been ticked off by all the lawyers, the top lawyers in the state, enshrined it into legislation that we can actually have a choice. So we have been democratically elected, and we are taking on legislation that has been put in front of us democratically. So any suggestion that we do not have the power, we do not have the right, is wrong. The candidate who's next in line, from my knowledge of him, and I've never drank tea at his place and he's never drank tea at mine, but I know a little bit about his background because I followed the trail of the elections, have done for a long time. I would suggest that he has done more for this community, certainly in the Livingstone Shire, than all of us around the table here put together. He's innovative, he's smart, he's hardworking, he's dedicated and he's honest. If we can't find somebody of that calibre a place around this table, given the opportunity, I think we've lost the plot. And all I can say is that we have the right, we have the responsibility, and we'll make the choice because the government gave us that opportunity and we chose to take it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. Right. Councillors, I don't feel the need to sum up, so I think we'll conclude debate and we'll just go to the vote on this issue.
Sorry, division, Mr. Mayor, for recording.
Okay, so Councillor Hutton's call for a division. Right, so those councillors voting in favour of the resolution, please stand. So that is Councillors Mather, Eastwood, Ireland, Bellow and Friend. Those against, Councillor Hutton. So recorded. And so that motion is carried. All right, councillors, as this is the only item on the agenda for today's meeting, as it's a special meeting, we'll wrap up proceedings. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you to the members of the community viewing in on live stream. And thank you to members of the press who've attended and our officers as well. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.